the bottom line is though, is that, you know, some of those Google AdWord dollars are now moving over to Amazon because reputations are being made and diminished on Amazon. So if you're to get to your question about, if you're an established brand, you've been around for 20 years, or you're very iconic, you've been around for 100 years, you got to be watching Amazon. And it's very hard to not watch it. It's very hard to keep your products off of it, even if you wanted to.
Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, the show where we explore e-commerce business strategy and the future of shopping online. Your host is John Giorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a full-service agency dedicated to growing brands on Amazon. Every week, John talks shop with the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. For today's episode, John talks with Jay Lagarde, founder and CEO of eCom Engine. The two discuss strategies for national brands on the Amazon marketplace, including review strategy, reputation management, and the changing dynamic between direct import sellers and legacy brands. So we hope you enjoy.
Jay, welcome to the show.
John, thanks very much for having us here. I really appreciate being asked to be on board, to come on board and talk to you today.
Absolutely. So, it'd be great to just start out a little bit about you and eCom Engine and kind of your history in the e-commerce space.
Yeah, totally. So, I kind of got into this space, I guess, like most of us, before we really knew what was happening, playing around in the seller space a little bit, and just, trading things online, and went in and started to work with early sellers around 2005, 2006. Started doing some just consulting work for individual sellers, doing integrations, helping them think about multi-channel, helping them think about scaling. It was a lot of fun. And what we ended up realizing very early on is that reputation was going to become increasingly important, because the whole marketplace is driven off of reputation. That's where you connect buyer and seller and brands, and you reduce the informational asymmetry within the marketplace by exposing what people think about each other, and what you think about the brand, the product, what you think about the seller. And so we went early on, before we were really a SaaS company, which is like a hosted software as a service. We had developed a platform for reputation management where we could automate messaging and monitor some things. And so then we gradually realized that was driving a lot of help for our users, our more, custom clients, if you will. And that's kind of what brought us to build, our first tool, which was Feedback 5, our first SaaS tool. And we really have, we kind of built the first reputation management tool. And then, first it was more seller reputation, then it quickly became product and brand reputation. And we've been in that space ever since. And it's not going away anytime soon, just because it's such an important part of the magic of the Amazon marketplace to make it work.
Yeah. I think that's a great intro. This concept of reputation and brand is very fluid right now, based on the democratization of e-commerce and now access to all of these customers through platforms like Amazon and direct to consumer and all these other things. I know that you're really an expert on the Amazon marketplace side of things, and we had talked before the show a little bit about national brands, so mid-market, enterprise, national brands, and how they should be viewing the marketplace and how they should be viewing their role in general as a brand on the platform. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you have to think about it that, you look back a few years ago, they were not that long ago. Things have moved so quickly. National brands were hardly even aware of Amazon. There were lots of sellers selling their stuff on Amazon, but it wasn't really on their radar screen. And in our experience from the customers that we have, and what we have noticed is that as Amazon started to become and widely recognized as the, becoming the search engine of record for products. I mean, it kind of replaced Google. That brands started to realize that they could not ignore Amazon. They really had to become Amazon experts, even though they didn't want to. they had to be there. And so, some brands were early, but everybody's watching it now. And so what brands have recognized is that Amazon moves them into a much more dynamic, agile environment than many of them had been used to before. Things move much, much faster. Their reputation can be affected much faster. Competitors can come in out of the blue, out of nowhere, and just come up out of thin air and have thousands of reviews in very short order of time. And that's just something that never happened before. And so brands have had to get adjusted to that. And that's why, I think they're using, consultants like you, because they need to get all the optics in place to deal with this new reality. And that's what we've been observing. We do serve a number of mid-size and even some larger size brands that are selling on the 3P platform for sure. And that's kind of the story that we've seen, including some brands local to us here in Virginia that are close by. And we've just kind of observed their increasing intensity on the Amazon marketplace because it's where people are. Even if it used to be, as people used to talk about showrooming, right?
Yeah.
And that's where obviously that at one point there was a promotion for a brief period of time. You go to the showroom and you end up buying from Amazon and you get a special discount because you were no. Obviously, the stores didn't like that, but now you're seeing something different. What you're seeing sometimes is people will go to the web and they'll go to Amazon and learn about the product, and then they'll run over to Best Buy or whatever, and they'll buy it. And so, the term that we hear sometimes is webrooming. And so it's just interesting. And so the bottom line is that, some of those Google AdWord dollars are now moving over to Amazon because reputations are being made and diminished on Amazon. So if you're to get to your question about if you're an established brand, you've been around for 20 years or you're very iconic, you've been around for 100 years, you got to be watching Amazon. And it's very hard to not watch it. It's very hard to keep your products off of it, even if you wanted to. And so you're partially playing defense. You're trying to play both defense and offense. Why? Because you want to get your brand out. You want to get in front of new customers, either in the US or globally. But you also need to be constantly playing defense, and you've got to watch what is happening in your competitor space and in your own space in terms of your own product reviews and what's going on. It's really interesting, John, if you look at there's a recent IPO, Anchor, if you're familiar with that brand that sells electronics and accessories and things on Amazon. And it's really an Amazon native. It's a digital native brand. It's an Amazon native brand. They grew up on Amazon. They're no longer just a creature of Amazon. You can now go into your Costco store and pick up some Anchor chargers.
Sure.
You couldn't do that a few years ago, but you can today. So this is a classic story about the new upstart brand that has come in and established itself against the more pre-existing accessory folks out there.
Yeah.
And so really it's interesting. I mean, if you're an established brand, you're not going to be like an Anchor, but you could certainly learn to look at what Anchor did and how they worked. And because Anchor grew up as a digital Amazon centric brand, and they had to act like that. And so you will see that they move at a very fast pace as a company. And if you read what the head of Anchor talks about his growth plan, is he was watching reviews. They watch reviews on Amazon of their own products, and I'm sure they watch other products as well. That is a feeder for their product management. So that customer experience that they're constantly testing and watching, that goes straight to their product managers. They sift through it, and that's what drives innovation at that company. And not every brand is that level of innovation brand or that type of innovation, but everybody's got to innovate in some way in order to stay ahead of this market. I mean, you got to innovate in some way because things are moving so fast on Amazon that if you're not innovating in some fashion, you're gonna become less relevant over time. Yeah.
So, let's drill down into this topic of reviews a little bit more. What are the anchors of the world, the strong kind of digitally native brands doing better than the national brands when it comes to reviews?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, I don't think there's any, black and white on this. I mean, some incumbent brands have become quite digitally adept. I think that a very high attention to online reputation, and Amazon online reputation is just huge. I mean, it could be at Facebook, it could be at other places too. But as we said, Amazon is the search record and the research place of record these days for most product information. And so that's where the eyeballs are going. And that's, if you had to pick one place, that's the place to spend your time for watching your reputation, what your brand is doing, what your competitor brands are doing. So obviously they do that better because that's how they grew. They learned at that fast pace. And I would say that's probably, the number one thing. And then they feed that information back into their product strategy.
So basically, taking the actual customer feedback you're getting and really using that to actually innovate faster, kind of speed up that innovation cycle by having virtually real-time feedback on your products. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And I would say, and I would add to that, I mean, it's almost common sense, but it's worth pointing out, is that you've got to monitor your reputation. And you can't, the rules of Amazon are obviously they're good rules. They're there for a very good reason. You can't go and force people to change their reviews or even ask them to, frankly. But you can go respond to reviews, and you can be proactive about watching them. And it's interesting. So you think, well, all you want to address are these negative reviews. You don't want to address positive reviews, or you don't want to think about them. But that's not necessarily true for a couple of reasons. Positive reviews can tell you what you're doing good, number one. Yep. And number two, it's interesting. We were working with a brand once, a very, very large, iconic brand that was in the baby space and child space. And they were concerned about positive and negative reviews like everybody, but their concern was sometimes about the positive reviews, which is kind of counterintuitive. They would get concerned about the positive reviews. Why? Because sometimes people would go on Amazon and they would talk about the cool, great ways they were using the product. And the brand recognized that this is not a safe or proper way to use the product. And they felt that in a subtle way, that it could undermine trust in the brand, because people were advocating and talking about the brand is great, but talking about it in a way that was not intended by the brand. Yeah. And so they felt they needed to monitor their Amazon channel and respond to provide good brand awareness about how to use the product properly and in a safe and effective way that would achieve the goals that the company had set out to achieve.
Sure. Yeah. We've also seen, that brands, usually the people that are in it every day, that are working with the product every day, that are designing it, branding it, doing all these things that actually work for the brand manufacturer, may get caught up in their own product, and there's multiple feature sets, but they kind of emphasize one over another. And oftentimes what I've seen is customers tend to focus on different things that are much more sort of practical, or the features are all there, but customers can kind of drive you in a different direction in terms of focus. And ultimately you should be focused on your customer and what they actually want, not what you think is cool. And those can be two very different things in building and innovating within a consumer product. So I think that's also kind of an angle on that brands should
totally. That reminds me of I think it was Bezos's letter. I think it was 2017, if I'm not mistaken, where he has a little, it's just a little short annual letter, and he's got a little paragraph in there where he talks about how a good product manager thinks and how they really kind of hang out with their customer in a sense. I mean, this is not exactly his words, but this is, they kind of get the vibe of what the customer is up to, and they almost try to look for opportunities that the customer wouldn't necessarily see. And it's very, very nice little statement. And I think that's a good example of what you're talking about. You want the product manager to really, they need to think in their own head about where they want to go, but they also need to connect with the customer. So it's a bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah. So another topic around reviews that comes up a lot, we'll get a little bit controversial here, is fake reviews and basically gaming the system. This is obviously still happening in a lot of cases. It's fairly widespread. Disclaimer here is we're not advocating anything that violates Amazon's policies, but I think it's good to be aware and realistic about the environment. So, a question that we get a lot is, what do you do when you're essentially competing on an unlevel playing field, where you have competitors that are willing to kind of violate rules, sometimes laws, and you're not, because you're an ethical company. How should national brands be viewing this?
Yeah, I think that is a $90 million question that any established brand is going to be dealing with in Amazon, because they're frustrated. They're seeing the fakes. I mean, that's one thing. There's a whole set of tools that you can eliminate the fakes, but then they're seeing this other thing. They're seeing, not only fake products, but they're seeing fake reviews, and those reviews can take place on their products. They can take place on competitors' products. And that's another reason why, obviously you need to monitor what's going on in the market from a review perspective in order to deal with it. So there's no perfect answer, because the market is so fast. Amazon, to their credit, has been putting in place tools to gradually curb these fake reviews. But I think the way you put it is just quite crisp and nice. It creates an unlevel playing field, and Amazon certainly is aware of that. They've always said, from ever since I've been working with Amazon, and it goes back a long time, we want to create a level playing field. Yeah. We want to create a real competitive market, and there's clearly an asymmetry there within the players, and so it's a problem, and it's a huge problem for brands, and so. I think that there are some things going on right now that brands that are looking positively in this regard. First of all, I think Amazon has genuinely committed to watching in a more systematic way, using some of their immense, digital capabilities to start weeding out some of these negative reviews. We all know they're still there. I mean, anybody that sees and can watch, they're still there. There's another development that I don't know what effect this would have, but it could have an effect. And you have to think this was one of Amazon's motives for doing it, is that, and this happened just in the last few weeks. Every seller now has their address put up there. That's a brand new thing. All of a sudden, sellers are no longer anonymous.
Yeah. Now,
how this impacts the marketplace long term, I think it remains to be seen. Maybe these are fake addresses. Maybe they're, if they're often somewhere in some place in Asia that nobody really there. We don't know yet. But regardless, they're there. Those addresses are now there, and time will tell whether the additional, very, very significant additional transparency that brings into the market will tend to mitigate some of these, products which rise up out of nowhere with a bunch of fake reviews, because now you're no longer the hidden person. You have to be transparent. And so I think it could make a big difference.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Amazon's general kind of push to more transparency is an important one, because there's always going to be an incentive to game the system, right? There's a very clear monetary incentive, so bad actors are always going to have an incentive. It's always going to be a bit of a cat and mouse game, but I think the more you kind of shine a spotlight on these dark corners, the more the rats tend to scurry away, because you just can't operate in an illegal or unethical way when a big spotlight is shined on you. So I actually think it's a simple adjustment, but I'm optimistic that that's going to help clean up a lot of these bad actors. It's a good transition actually into, and I don't want to infer that all import brands are doing things unethically, but and that's in no way true. I think Anchor's a great example of one that's done a tremendous job at innovating and playing by the rules. There are a lot of kind of new competitors, though. Let's say a lot of them are kind of these direct import Asian brands. For any one of our national brands that we work with, in what I will say is a somewhat easy to enter category, a category that doesn't take, building your own factory over 10 years to develop. So you're not going to see this in smartphones, but for, 80% of products, especially in hard lines, you're going to have your your 5 other competitors that and that are at Target and Walmart and Kroger. And then you're going to have 300 other brands that you've never heard of and started up, 2 months ago. I think this is something that really confuses people and frustrates them. And I think there's also a lot of just kind of misinformation out there about like, who are these brands? What are they doing? You don't want to group them all together, but talk to me a little bit about your perspective on this and kind of,
obviously
how is it happening? Like, what should national brands do about it?
Yeah, that's another $90 million question. Traditionally in, CPG category, you're dealing with physical shelves, you're dealing with physical streets, and things do move. You do have competition come in. For example, years ago, the grocery stores, began to put in their own branded products, and the iconic brands had to adjust to that. What happens on Amazon is really a completely different magnitude of challenge that they need to deal with. And what we used to tell our sellers that were thinking about, pricing and positioning and stuff on Amazon is that, and even inventory forecasting and demand forecasting, we would say, look, it's a different world out there. Traditional demand forecast models that would work in a traditional brick and mortar store, it's a different world, because the population of who can come into your store changes every day. You don't know. Yep. Your positioning changes every day, and it's almost like, okay, so you run a hardware store, and then you've been doing it for 20 years, and then tomorrow, you wake up and you come in, and there's a big new Lowe's across the street. Well, that type of phenomenon happens every day on Amazon. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter what, if you're in one of these spaces where you don't have a luxury brand, you don't have you have just a regular old consumer packaged good brand, right? And so it's true that you can have the factories that are there in Asia that maybe you're related to the one that makes your product or whatever. I don't, Sure. And out of the blue, you could have 3, 4, or 5 of these people pop up on Amazon. No warning. The digital shelf is unlimited. And so they could just pop up out of nowhere. And then what they can do, because Amazon is such a dynamic marketplace, I mean, these brands can incubate very, very rapidly. Now, are there some good aspects of that? Well, of course, but are there some dangers to it? Absolutely. I mean, the good aspects of it are everybody's challenged, competition is good, and so forth. But you have to think about what Amazon thinks about. They're all about the customer. We're all about serving the customer. And so you have to think your brand, your any good brand wants to serve and delight their customer. They want to get under their customers, understand what their real needs are. And so the question is, are customers really served by a brand that pops up and has, less quality and less, liability if something goes wrong, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we all know the issues that you don't get when you don't know who the person is and you don't know who's making it. You don't know how it's been tested. You don't know how safe it is. You don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know how to get warranty coverage. You don't have a warranty network to, service this thing. I mean, it goes on and on. And so there's a lack of clarity that can happen on the Amazon platform. There's a lack of clarity. So the customer is buying things on Amazon, but in order to make a smart choice as a consumer, you have to understand what it is you're buying. You have to have information. And so what can happen on Amazon is that you can sometimes get great bargains and good deals, which is, I personally have done that myself. On the other hand, sometimes I bought things where I felt I didn't really get the full information there. And so if I was a brand, and thinking about brands, and many of our brands do, they look, how do I differentiate myself? How do I think about, what is the customer looking for? What are they trying to achieve? And then how do I build into my brand messaging on Amazon, those hidden things that the customer may not always look at. So, it gets very touchy with the fake reviews, and then there's the Amazon recommended program and all of that, whether that's not real. That's a kind of an electronic curation. It's not
Amazon's choice.
Yeah, it's not really a real curation. It appears to be.
Sure.
And so if you're a brand, I mean, obviously you talk to Amazon and you say, look, hey, you're not helping the customer here. You gotta give them the information they need. They're buying something that's a pig in a poke kind of a thing. So you can have these kinds of conversations, but I also think that if you're a brand, you want to bring these conversations up to the foreground. You need to educate your consumer about what they know and what they don't know. And so that's what a traditional brand does. It's a conveyor of, among many other things, it's a conveyor of knowledge and trust about a product. And so Amazon's a place where, brands can shine when they bring that traditional brand value and make it more explicit to their buyers.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'll paraphrase a little bit and correct me if you feel differently, but I think it's really important for brands to be aware of the dynamics on Amazon, aware of what's happening with reviews, and aware of what's happening with some of these Asian import brands. Some of them are real competitors. Some of them are kind of fly by night, thorn in your side guys that might be around for 6 weeks. But at the end of the day, what you should be focusing 95+% of your effort on is your product and your brand and your reviews. And of course, if there's something that's really causing you pain and directly impacting your product, you should fight that. And, if it's IP infringement or something real tangible, you should fight it, but you're never going to police the Amazon marketplace for them. You're never going to fix the fake review problem for Amazon. No. So that you really need to say, what differentiates me? What differentiates, my product, my brand? Is it reviews? Is it quality? Is it a feature set? And hone in on that, because, customers are savvy. Customers do understand that there's review manipulation. They do understand that if a brand they've never heard of is selling a product for 20% of the normal retail price, maybe that's not the best quality. Maybe they should, take a look at something that's actually more expensive, but might last longer than 2 uses. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
110%. The more, and you're right, customers do get it, but the more they get it, right? The more customers get it, I think it's true. The brand can't police Amazon, right? But the more customers begin to get it, and they are increasingly beginning to get it, right? Yeah. The news stories and everything else, they're savvy shoppers and they're smart. The more they get it, I mean, Amazon's naturally going to respond to that and recognize that if they have got holes in their system which allow for these information issues to persist on the platform, then it's going to incentivize them to fix it. And then, a brand is, you say, well, you can't worry about other people. Well, I think it's true. You need to focus on your customer and getting there. But if you're getting clobbered,
Yeah.
and it's because of, what you think are, you can't prove it, or maybe you can, but if they're bad reviews or things that are exposing, you have to have a way to, fight to the top on Amazon, whether it's through ads or whatever, or any other way, but you've got to do that. And again, I do feel like, you don't have a lot of power as maybe a small to mid-sized brand with Amazon, but I think you need to point out where you see the issues and be part of the voice, to ask for a proper marketplace that it does truly honor the needs of the consumer.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line of it. So it's whether the consumers are being well served, the customers being well served.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously I am a savvy Amazon consumer when I shop there, but I was buying a backpack last night. And it's funny because as I was going through this, I realized I was sort of naturally filtering out all of the lower price point options with brands I'd never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
I actually bought a more expensive product intentionally from a national brand. It paid whatever, $60 for it. There were options at $12 and $13 and $15. And I just immediately in my mind, without even really thinking about it, I just filtered them out and went, nope, they're not even in my consideration set. And I do wonder how many customers are actually starting to kind of fall into that natural behavior on the platform.
Did you have to dig to find that known brand, or did it just pop up to you?
Well, so it's interesting. So I found this whole exercise fairly interesting, and obviously I shop on Amazon all the time, but this one was particularly interesting because backpacks are one of those categories that are super easy to enter. I can go to China, I can put a $40,000 down payment, and I'm in the backpack business tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So it's actually a category where I would say the national competitors, the national brands, are not doing as good of a job as they should be in aggregate at surfacing their products, because the first 3 pages were all brands that I'd never heard of. There were a couple sponsored ads in the mix, which I clicked on, and actually one of those led me to purchase. I think it was North Face. So it's interesting though that from just an organic reach perspective, it's all these import brands, some of which I'm sure are fine and legitimate and great.
You're right.
Probably don't know which is which. And then you go back to that. So I'm going to trust the national brand phenomenon, which is this. I know we were talking about this kind of before the show here, before we started to record, but I find this phenomenon fascinating because Amazon democratized brand. Like it used to be that, the brands were whatever Target would stock or whatever Costco would stock. So if you were buying a backpack, you had 5 options. I mean, you had whatever options were in front of your face when you walked into the store. That was it. So it was naturally sort of self-reinforcing that those were the only 5 you should ever be thinking about. Amazon completely changed that. But now I feel like because of the trust factor, which you're talking about, it started to come back to now like going back to a national brand, because now that you have every option, now you have to be more deliberate about decision making. You can't rely on the retailer to do it for you. Thoughts on that?
I've been in the same shoes with the same set of products. I've gone and bought. I mean, you're dazzled by the number of reviews and how good they are.
Yeah.
And I buy it and it's like, it's not quite exactly up to snuff. I mean, it's a good value. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it can be a lot of value for the money, but there were just a few things that didn't quite hit it for me. And then I went back on Amazon and I searched for the iconic known brands, the Targuses and the Samsonite or whatever. And then they don't necessarily shine as well on Amazon. They're not, nobody's, this is a few years ago. I can't say, but it was a neglected, product on Amazon. It's still FBA and everything. It was like, this looks like a worse product, but I know that it's a better product, and I paid more for it and I bought it and I was very pleased. And I've had a very similar thing. I once was in a buying a small appliance, And as a test, it was a few years ago, I bought two. I bought two. One of them I gave to one of my kids, and I gave the brand I hadn't heard of to one of my kids.
Yeah,
Well, it's
sure.
pretty good. I'm gonna just give it to you.
Sure.
But they were both two products, and one I did pay a lot more than the other. One was a very, very well known high end brand, and the other was a brand I had never heard of. But I tell you what, based on Amazon, it was the better brand. I mean, based on the reviews, if you didn't know the brand names, you would think this is the one to get, or it was among the 10 among the 10 brands that were among the ones to get.
Sure.
Whereas the old iconic brand looked like it was an overpriced, dinosaur or something.
Yeah.
But I ended up, again, I got them both. They're both good. Was there a lot of value for the low price? Arguably there was. I mean, I'm not saying, but again, you don't know with a product like this. You don't know, is it going to last? Is the motor going to burn out? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Whereas the big brand, the big name, there's a lot behind that. And if they were putting out junk, it would destroy them.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. So I kept the expensive one, and the other. And as far as I know, my child hasn't complained. My daughter hasn't complained about it. So I think it's okay. But
yeah, good.
So.
Yeah, that's it's super interesting. I mean, I think that, I still see there's this whole like conversation, and I feel like maybe 5 years ago it was more in vogue, but kind of is it the death of the brand? Has Amazon and direct to consumer created an environment where brands don't matter anymore? And I don't believe that's true.
Yeah.
I think it's just different than it used to be. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think even Amazon, I don't think there's any one Amazon. I think you see Amazon over time, and you see different parts of Amazon. I'm sure that there are elements that could say, if we could just build our own Amazon brands and our all of our clothing brands and all of our this, that, and the other brands, and we would just take over 50% of the sales, I think they'd be happy to do that. But understandably. But I think what they're recognizing is that there's something about the brand connection that can't totally be replaced by, just the platform brands. There's something about the personalized brand connection. There's something about the innovation and creativeness that comes from all of those small and mid-size and large brand creators out there that can't fully be replicated on the marketplace. And so I think Amazon knows that, and they are encouraging and incubating brands. Now, what their long-term game is, nobody knows. I'm not sure they fully know. They're still in day one. It's still in day one, I guess, as it said. Yeah. And so, they're brands, but if you're an iconic brand, you got to protect it, and you've got to be more agile. I'm in the software world. We use the word agile all the time, but it really is a good term for just a management mindset about how you look at the market. You're in the Amazon market, anytime there's a policy change, you need to jump and figure out what it is and serve your customers by being on top of what's going on. Well, these brands can't just say, because this is the way we did it for 40 years, that's the way we're going to do it. They have to be much more agile. And it's not going to be, I'm going to adjust this one way once. It's going to be a little bit different world. And so, yeah, I think brands have a lasting long-term value. I think a lot can be said around that. But I do think that the brands that last are going to have to think differently and be, among other things, more agile as brands to thrive in the long term.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this has been a great conversation, Jay. I would just say, I think bringing it full circle, basically, Amazon is a very different beast than any other marketplace or retailer. There's a lot of competition and maybe kind of quote unquote unfair things that are happening.
Yeah.
And you can still be successful as a national brand. You can still play to your strengths. Brands still matter, but you can't operate using the old rules because they don't apply anymore. So you have to be faster, more nimble, more realistic about what the competition is doing, who the competition is, what advantages they may have, and then play to your strengths. There's certainly some defense that you need to employ as well. I guess maybe in closing, if you could tell us a little bit more about eCom Engine and how, people learn more about eCom Engine, learn more about you, connect with you, any of that would be
Yeah, I
great.
appreciate that. Yeah. So yeah, as this a company, we're just very passionate about helping entrepreneurs and small mid-sized brands. We want to see them thrive on Amazon and off of Amazon. And so we really started out as kind of thinking of ourselves as an ecom engine. We thought of ourselves as empowering, as enabling, as providing tools to help people to shine on their own and to be their own, to grow as brands. I mean, initially we're focused on sellers, and now we got brands that are not sellers, and now we've got brands that are becoming sellers that they weren't before. So it's a great place to be. It's an exciting place of change, and we just see ourselves playing a small but hopefully important role in helping the market to grow and just helping our firms to thrive, and making sure they are positioned to thrive in the new normal that Amazon is, and some related platforms and internet technology has brought to us. So
Awesome.
That's our space. Yeah,
I love it. Jay, thanks so much for being on.
appreciate it. Really enjoyed the conversation.
All right.
All right, take care.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of eCommerce Deep Dive. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you get a chance, go in and leave us a rating. It would help a lot. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.